Hi there, Craig Cooney here. Thank you so much for clicking on Find Out More about my book, The Tension of Transition. It's a book that I wrote over 40 days. I wrote a chapter a day for 40 days, and it really was based around the journey of myself and my wife and my 6-year-old son. Well, he's 6 now, Elijah. And the journey of transition we went through over a period of 2 or 3 years as we stepped out of a very secure and safe life where we were leading a thriving, growing church, one of the fastest and largest churches in our country at that time. My wife had a fantastic job, the job that she had been looking for years, and we were in a very comfortable position, and yet through a dream, through a prophetic revelation, through a vision, God told us to move on, but he didn't tell us where we were moving on to. And so began the journey of transition for us as a family. We had left something behind, the security and stability that we liked. I like security, I like stability, I like to know where my pay is coming from every month and that I can support my family. I don't tend to do a lot of reckless, silly decisions. But God had spoken clearly. And in the vision he had given me, which I talk about in the book, he had shown me that if I stepped out in faith, that he would have somebody waiting on the other side. And so we left the location we were in. We went on sabbatical for 4 months, spent some time in California and some time here in Ireland. And we came back and we had nothing to go to. And that's when I began to worry. That's when I began to question everything that God had spoken to me, or I thought God had spoken to me. And I began to doubt. And as the sabbatical came closer and closer to an end, I began to worry and stress even more. If I'm just being really honest, I was trying to hold on to the words that God had said to me, but I was worried. And it came right down to the wire. But as always, God was faithful. And he has been faithful. And I talk about how we journeyed through that, some of the lessons that I learned in that season. I talk about leaving things behind, leaving people and situations behind, and just the difficulty and the struggle of that. I talk about the in-between, because a lot of life is spent in the in-between, where you've left here and you know you're going here. You're not even maybe sure what this looks like, but you know that you've got to get here and you're stuck in this in-between. People say that God never closes one door without opening another, but they never talk about the hallway in between. And that hallway can be dark, and it can be depressing, and it can be discouraging, and it can be lots of things. And so I talk about that. I talk about navigating through that wilderness. I use the story of Israel in the desert and how they spent 40 years navigating through wilderness to get to the promised land. I talk about finding favour and following God's favour on your life. I talk about making room by clearing things out of your life to make room for the new. I talk about necessary endings. I talk about overcoming obstacles and opposition, because inevitably when you step out in faith there will be obstacles and opposition. Some of them are going to be out there, external, but for me actually a lot of them are in here. They're internal, they're insecurity, they're inferiority, they're feelings of inadequacy that I have wrestled with my whole life, if I'm being honest with you. And so I just talk about dealing with some of those issues of identity and who I am in Christ, who I am as a child and a son of God. And I talk about, I'm trying to think what else I go through in the book, new beginnings, how we know God is opening doors. Signs of opening doors, signs of shifting seasons. I really found writing that bit helpful. How do we know that a season is shifting in our lives? What are the signs externally and internally that God is shifting something in our lives? And I talk about pressing through the storm to get to the other side being the place that God has destined and purposed for each one of us. And so that's a little bit about the book. It is a fairly big book. It was 40 chapters. I cut it down to 30, which is still 390 pages. It can be read, it's intended to be read over 30 days. And the feedback has been honestly incredible. I have been just stunned by the feedback and just how encouraging it has been to hear that people have been radically impacted. Some people's feedback I can share publicly, but a lot of the stories actually are very private, because the transition and the change that it made in people's lives was so personal. But I am so thankful for how God has used this book, The Tension of Transition, and how he has impacted people. If you want it, it's available. I hate being salesy. I really do. I particularly, I hate being salesy Christian. I'm just being honest. And yet I poured my heart and soul into this, and I have had hundreds, literally hundreds of emails from people telling me how it has impacted their lives. And so that's why I want you to read it. If you want it, buy it. If you don't, that's okay. But if you've clicked on this, you're obviously a little bit interested. So feel free to click on the button below and buy it. But if you don't want to, that's okay too. God bless. I pray God's favour on you. I pray God's blessing on you. I pray that God would open doors for you and propel you into the next season that he has for you, and that you would know his abundance, his favour and his goodness in every part of your life. So God bless and thank you for listening. Bye.